what we're trying to accomplish here and when we're talking about finances. It isn't to add to God's riches. Psalm 50:12 says, "If I were hungry, I would not tell thee, for the world is mine and the fullness thereof." Verse 10 of the same chapter says, "For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills." We can't add to God's riches. He has everything. Now, just so it's clear, we're going to go into the "it is." And the first point is, so you can give to God. That's different than adding to God's riches. Proverbs 3:9 says, "Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thine increase." Our goal financially is to help other people. 1 Corinthians 10:24 says, "Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth." It's not our own wealth we're after. We're trying to make sure that we're helping other people. It is so we can, because it's part of providing for your family. 1 Timothy 5:8. This is a very strong verse here. It says, "But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel." It's a pretty serious thing. If you're not providing for your own house, it says you've denied the faith and are worse than an infidel. It's very strong language that God uses for someone who's not providing for the needs of his family and taking care of his finances. Our goal financially is so finances don't hinder you from the will of God. Psalm 106:34-36 says, "They did not destroy the nations." It's talking about Israel here. "They did not destroy the nations, but were mingled in among the heathen and learned their works. And they served their idols, which were a snare unto them." And I would use this as a parallel. The world's way of dealing with money can become a snare to us. And one of the goals of this series is that finances not be a snare, not be a hindrance to you doing the will of God. All right, this isn't in your notes, but I want you to just think for a minute about the paths before us we have when we're considering finances. What if we don't do anything about our finances? What's going to happen? Well, we're going to have worry in our lives. We're going to be concerned about finances unduly. We're going to have marriage problems. We're going to fight about, well, this money needs to go here, no, this money needs to go here, and we're not going to be on the same page, knowing and in agreement with our spouse. I've heard that marriage, the number 2 marriage problem is finances, right after in-laws. And once you're married, you can't do anything about who your in-laws are, but we can do something about your finances. If we don't do anything about our finances, you'll have the distraction of stuff. Stuff can be a big distraction in our lives. It can distract us from doing the will of God, just to consume our time. And so we don't want that. If we don't do anything about our finances, we'll have an inability to see how to do the will of God. We'll say, I can't go do this thing that God tells me to do because I got to go earn this money here, or I got to go pay this bill, or I got to take care of this other thing. And we won't be able to focus on doing the will of God and say, God just asked me to do this. I'm just going to do it. That's what I'm going to do. We don't want that to be a distraction there. All right, so if those are the consequences of inaction, we do have some good consequences if we take action on our finances. We'll have peace. A peace that's not a trusting in the money that we have, but it's a freedom from worry and a concern about that in that way. It's an unbiblical worry. We'll have shared goals with our with our spouse. We'll be on the same page, and we'll be working together to get to the same place because we'll have defined our goals and defined where we want to be financially. If we take action on our finances, it will help us with our time. Yes, handling your finances properly will take some time, but not handling your finances properly will also take your time. You'll be juggling credit cards. You'll be trying to figure out which bill to pay next. You'll be concerned about it, and it'll be zapping your time. If we take action, we will have freedom to do the will of God without delay. So let's talk about, in today's lesson, since it's just an introduction, we're only going to talk about the first step to financial freedom. And before we talk about debt or budgeting or anything else, this is going to be our first step. I want you to think about what would happen if you tripped on the way down the stairs today and broke your ankle. Okay, think about what happened if you got down to your car and found out you needed a new part in your car. Maybe the alternator went out, maybe the fuel pump went out, something in the car went out. Think about what would happen if you went home and discovered that one of your major appliances wasn't running. Your refrigerator wasn't working, your stove wasn't, your microwave, whatever. One of your major appliances wasn't working. What would you do? If you're like most Americans, what you would do is you would pull out your credit card and you would go into debt. And you would use debt to solve that problem. So our first point here is we want to break that cycle, that method that you use. So the first step to financial freedom is save $1,000 for an emergency fund. Now you're like, but I'm in debt. I've got all this debt, and how do I save $1,000? Well, let's talk about that. We'll talk about it, some ways that you can save $1,000 for an emergency fund. Stop saving for anything else. Yes, really, stop saving. If you don't have this emergency fund money available, don't save for anything. That means no retirement savings, no car savings, no house savings, nothing, whatever savings categories you might have. If you can't handle a $1,000 emergency without whipping out your credit card and paying for it that way, you need to stop saving in those other categories so that you can do that. We want to break that cycle. Make only minimum payments on all your debts. And again, yes, really, I know we're trying to get you out of debt. But in order to get you out of debt, we need this buffer, this $1,000, so we can catch emergencies and break that cycle of pulling out the credit card to pay for those emergencies. So only pay the minimum on all of your debts. Stop spending money. This means whatever you have to do to get this $1,000, stop spending on anything that you can stop spending on. Restaurants, you can stop spending on that. How? Eat the pantry bare. Keep going back to it until there's nothing left in it. And then go to the store instead of the restaurant. Stop going on vacations. Stop giving monetary gifts. Give gifts of service instead. Stop buying in bulk. Yes, I know you'll save money in the long run, but we're not interested in the long run right here. We're interested in saving $1,000 so you can have an emergency fund so you can stop using the credit card. That's our goal here at this point. Don't go to stores if you can avoid it. That's where you spend money. Don't go to stores. You're going to have to go to grocery stores, and that was my next point. Don't go online if that's where you buy stuff. Don't go to eBay. Don't go to Amazon. Don't go to whatever places online and where you're going to buy stuff and see stuff that you want to buy. Next point, and if you've already done this, you've already gone on one of those places and bought something, the next point is sell something. Have a garage sale. Put something on eBay instead of buying something off of eBay. Don't leave anything unexamined. Look around your house, see what's there. Say, you know what, it's more important that I get out of debt and sell this thing so that I can have this $1,000 emergency fund than it is to have that thing. Use irregular income. Here's some examples of those things. It's not quite the right time of year for this, but if you get a tax refund, that would be an example of an irregular income that could go toward your $1,000 emergency fund. Some other examples, birthday money. That rebate check that finally came through. That maybe that friend that paid you off for the lunch you paid for him last Tuesday. Whatever other things that come in irregularly, think about using those for this emergency fund money. And finally, use regular income. That means when you first get paid, put it aside first. Say, I'm going to take this much money, I'm going to put it aside for my emergency fund. That's regular monthly income. And then do it every month. But you can also do it at the start of the month, and then when you get to the end of the month, if you say, look, I have some money left because I've been doing these other things. I've been not spending money. I've been selling things. Look, I've got money left. Well, then put that money aside as well for this emergency fund. So there are some ways that you can save money for the emergency fund. Now, what is this for? It is an emergency fund. That means don't touch it. A great deal on a new pair of shoes is not an emergency. Neither is a great deal on a gun. Right, Pastor? Use the emergency fund to keep the car running, not to put a new stereo in it. Use the emergency fund to patch the leak, not to renovate and redecorate the room. So those are some ideas. Use it for an emergency. Now, you may be saying, what kind of emergencies do you have? My emergencies are way over $1,000. Yes, you're probably right. You do have some emergencies that are over $1,000. And we'll talk about that more in the future lessons. But up front, when we're trying to get out of debt, the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to cover those things that make you automatically reach back there and say, I'm going to pay for this with my credit card because they're an emergency. And then we'll work on the larger things later in the schedule. So I put a class schedule there. Today we're talking, it's an introduction to the course. We're talking about the emergency fund. In week 2, next week, we're going to talk about getting out of debt. Then we're going to talk about creating a budget, and it's going to take a couple weeks. And then we're going to talk about saving and spending and just some various topics there. Now, if you'll skip down to the back page of your handout, you should see, well, I don't have it here. You should see a debt worksheet. And this is your homework for this week, what I'd like you to do. What you need to do with this is list out all your debts. Don't leave anything out. Include your credit cards, your student loans, your department store debt, home equity loans, and even that $100 your Aunt Mildred loaned you and hasn't looked at you at the same sense on family reunions. You thought she was going to die, but she's never going to die. You're going to have to pay that debt back, put it down on the paper. So some of you may have to think about this a little bit before you can remember all of them. Put them all down, list the balances, and then put the total down at the bottom. And I also put a column in there for your monthly interest payment. I'm not as interested in you filling that out. If you want to just do it real fast, You can ignore that column, but I think you'll find it interesting if you do go ahead and fill it out, how much you're paying monthly on interest that could be going for other things, really. And so I'm not going to ask to see those. These are for you to see, and they will help you when you think about next week's lesson, which is going to be talking about getting out of debt. Now on the page before that, I think is where I had it, we have a series challenge. Now this is for the whole entire series, not just for next week. That other one, that homework was for this week. If you can do it today. Get it done before next Sunday. But this challenge is for the whole series. You may have heard of people reading through the book of Proverbs in a month. Proverbs has 31 chapters, so in a month of 31 days, the whole book can be read in one chapter a day. Well, we're a little bit past that, so if you include today, you have 29 days left in June, but so you can finish it soon after. Here's the challenge. Read through the book of Proverbs, writing down what verses have to say about stewardship. So as you're reading along, and you come and you say, that verse has something to say about stewardship, I'm going to write that down. You should find something in almost every chapter about stewardship, something to be a good steward of. And you can categorize these if you want, make different categories of stewardship, ways that we can be stewards of the things God has given us. Now, you may say, but I don't have time to do this. Were you listening earlier? I talked about time, Okay. Let me help you this way. It took me an average of less than 8 minutes per chapter to do this, to read it, to write them down. I was also writing down other verses for another thing, but it took me an average of less than 8 minutes per chapter. No chapter took me more than 14 minutes. 14 minutes was the maximum amount of time. Maybe my kids interrupted me, I don't know. My kids, Luke and Emily, who just completed 2nd and 3rd grade, I timed them reading the first chapter of Proverbs, and they read it in less than 7 minutes. Not much time. You can use this time to do this. This is certainly doable. All right, and in closing, let's want to talk about someone who was a good steward in the Bible, that was a good example. Maybe you want to, after you're done reading through Proverbs and writing down stewardship things, maybe you can read the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a good steward of his capabilities, his time, and his resources. He used them well. What did he do? He petitioned the king. He led the people. He rebuilt the walls. He handled opposition. He defended the poor who were being charged usury by their brethren against the law of God. So he was working with finances there. He guarded the wall rebuilding, and he made provision for that and how to do it. He cleansed the chamber of the house of God and the priests that allowed it. And ultimately, he was responsible for a revival of righteousness in the land and amongst the people. So Nehemiah is a very good example of how to be a good steward of all of those things that we should be good stewards of that God has given us. All right, let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, I do thank you for this time that we've had to look at stewardship and what it means to be a good manager of the things that you've entrusted to us. I pray that you would help us as we go throughout this lesson, that we would understand more about how we can handle our finances and manage the resources that you've given us well. Help us to do these things and to not waste our time, to waste our capabilities, or to waste our resources, Lord. Help us to use them wisely and manage them well for you. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, service will start top of the hour.